introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Julie.
Good afternoon, good evening. I'm not really sure where you are, but I'm talking to you today from Colorado. I'm really pleased to be with you to do this because this is the work that I do most of the time. My work is to serve you, volunteers and missioners, to help you with your transitions. I'm involved with several programs to help prepare people to serve, so the transition into volunteer life. And then my main work is with people after their experience is over. We offer workshops for people to come after the workshop's over to come and process their experience with other volunteers and missioners. And so everything I'm going to share with you today comes out of those workshops. I'm only going to scratch the surface of what I could share with you. So if there's anything you would like to talk to me about or would like more information on, certainly let me know afterwards. One of the things that I've learned from people, whether they serve domestically or internationally, is that for many people, this transition after volunteer life is actually the hardest part of their experience. It's harder than the volunteer experience itself. That's not true for everybody, but for many people it is. I'm sure some of you will understand what I mean in the coming weeks and months as you begin your transition. I'm sure there's also some of you who are just ready for this to be over, whether you're grateful for it or whether it was a pretty bumpy ride. You're ready to move on to the next thing. Whether you're happy about this coming to an end or if you're really struggling with the fact that something so precious is coming to an end, no matter what your attitude, it's usually a pretty challenging transition. But what I've learned is that being intentional and preparing for and thinking about all of the stuff I'm going to talk to you about really can make a difference. It can really make this transition just another transition, one of many you'll have in your life. But taking time to prepare for the ending of this and for whatever's next does make a difference. So that's exactly what I'm going to do with you, is share with you hopefully things that are both meaningful, practical, help you be realistic. Everything I'm going to share with you is totally common sense. And every single thing I'm going to share you already know and you don't need me to tell you. But what I can do is to let you know this is what I hear from people over and over and over. So maybe you might want to really pay attention to it. I'm going to give you some information, but a lot of what I'm going to do is just give you some good reflection questions that will help you get to the actions and the steps that you might need to be taking in the coming weeks and months. I'd like to begin, though, by talking to you a bit about the concept of why it's challenging. And so I want to highlight this one for you. Father Tony Gittins has written a lot on mission. And he talks about the mission journey or the volunteer journey as a journey through three lands. He says that we start out in the place where we grew up, the place where we have always lived, called our homeland. When we leave that to go do what you've just been doing, we go to this new place that's we go with great openness and excitement, and we learn so much. He calls that Wonderland. Now, when we're done in Wonderland and we return to the place we started out from, it's no longer called homeland. It's called newfound land. Now, for some people, this is why that transition is so challenging. Sometimes we don't realize how much we have changed, and we're not anticipating how much the people we return to, our family and friends, how much they have changed in this year or two as well. One of the things that's really important to be conscious of your changes is the fact that because of this experience, this intense experience with the people you've been living with and serving with, your lens has changed. The way you look at the world will be influenced now by this experience that you just had. So we go back after these experiences and we look at the familiar, but we look at them in a whole new way because we have new information. We have this new lens from which to view the world. some of the feelings, I wanted to highlight some of the feelings that people often share with me, what it's like after their volunteer experience. And I highlighted a few of them for you. On this kind of represents all of that, the good and the bad. But the ones I wanted to mention to you is, first of all, that people grieve, go through a period of grieving after their experience is over. Whenever we have an ending, it's like a death. Whether you're happy for it to be over or this is going to be really hard to leave. We do go through some level of grief. It's especially true for anyone who is really connected to the people in the place where you are now, because you're grieving the loss of that relationship. Even though there's potential to still be involved and still be connected, it's going to be different. The next one is, many talk about how much they miss their life, their lifestyle, the things that they were part of, whether it was community life, whether it was their individual ministries. Many people mention that one of the things they miss is feeling like their life really mattered because they did things that were really important and really needed. So many people miss their life. And then, unfortunately, another one that many people mention is they feel isolated. You know, you go back to your family and friends, go back to your home communities maybe, or you go back and connect with your friends from college, whatever that is. Many people feel isolated because the people that they are surrounded by don't really understand their experience, and they certainly don't understand this the struggle that you're going through in transition, if that's true for you. Again, all of this may not be true for you, but I want to let you know about it. So to begin with, the first question we have for you to interact with has to do with your feelings. I'd like you to choose one of these images that closely represents how you're feeling about this change that you're about to go into, from the end of the program to starting again. So what I'd like you to do is pick a number, and this is one of Katie's interaction things. If you would pick a number of a photo that closely represents how you're feeling right now about your transition.
Julie, I'm seeing an 8 and a 3 and a 6 and another 8. 5, 8. 7. Someone mentioned 3 and 2. 8. So it seems like there's a lot of different responses.
Right. Great. Well, and the thing about one of the reasons why I chose the images that I did is on any given day you might feel these different things as you go through this transition. And you might have real mixed feelings. But I would think for most people there's some level of confusion or being overwhelmed. And if that's true, any of this is true, it's all very normal. And so that's what I'm going to do with you today, is kind of share with you kind of what's normal and what's healthy as we move forward through these weeks. So what we're going to do during this webinar is the goal is to leave well. And so we're going to focus on 4 areas that might influence what's ahead for you. So the first thing, I'm just going to briefly mention some key points about transition. We're going to look at some ways to help you take your next steps or to find some direction. We're going to look at how to say goodbye, and lastly, how to honor the experience. And again, I'm just going to skim the surface, but I wanted to give you an overview of each. So when I talk to people during my workshops after your experience is over, we do a lot about talking about transition and how it feels to be in transition. And I always get somebody who says, I thought I was the only one that feels this way. And the rest of the group is shaking their head. Understanding transition doesn't keep you from going through it, but it does help you know that you're normal, especially if you're not surrounded by a lot of people who understand this transition. I lived in Zimbabwe, and when I came back, I wasn't around anyone who understood what it was like to leave an experience like that. And everyone told me that, that I needed help. Well, I probably did need some help, but I was just really normal. I now know how normal I was. One of the things that I want you to keep in mind about this transition is you've been through transitions before, and you probably know a lot already. So I would encourage you to go back and look at some of the major transitions that you've gone through already, and and to remember what would be helpful for you as you go through this transition. You are your own best resource. I want to highlight a couple difficult things about transition and then two helpful things. So the first one has to do with the major issue in transition is a loss of identity. I knew who I was in that place, like where you are now, and now you're going to go into this unknown or uncomfortable place because you're starting over again. I mean, remember when you left college, after all those years, you got totally settled, and then you moved into this, and I'm sure it was really kind of difficult. So there are some issues that come up with this loss of identity. One of my workshop participants, when I was asking about how people felt in transition, one person described it this way, and I think this is the best description of transition I've ever heard. She said, "My spirit has not caught up with me yet." I think that that's what it is, that I don't feel like myself in this new place. And unfortunately, when we're in that, it's a pretty vulnerable time. In fact, I've had numerous people, whether they be 25-year-olds or 80-year-old nuns, say, I feel like I'm in junior high all over again. That whole insecurity, that time of self-doubt, wondering if we're going to be okay, if we're going to be accepted, if we're going to be good at what we do. Unfortunately, time of transition, sometimes it doesn't bring out the best in us. That insecurity time can bring out not our best side. Sometimes we fall into old patterns. I know many people, unfortunately, have to move back home because they can't afford to live on their own, and sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm my 14-year-old self all over again. And for some reason, my parents, who I get along so well with, we're not getting along again. So it's falling into old patterns. What do we do when we're not comfortable and we're not secure? How do we act? So being aware of transition is about a loss of identity, and it's my spirit has not caught up with me yet. The next thing I definitely want, if you don't hear anything else from me today, listen to this one. Okay, many of you are going straight into something else. You're going to graduate school or you've got a job lined up. But one of the things that can be a real problem is doing too much too soon after this transition. So think about how exhausting your year has been, and that your ending time is going to be really exhausting as you finish up, pack up, hand over your ministry, or whatever your ending time is going to be, as well as moving on to the next thing. Anyone in transition is depleted to some level. Their energy is depleted. And so I have a gas tank here. I always have people image if they had a gas tank on their chest. Where would it be? Where would the indicator be? Would you be at 3/4 of a tank, 1/4 of a tank, or are you gasping on fumes? And so when we go into our what's next, whether it be graduate school or if we have a job that we really want that's related to our studies or your ministry, these things are going to call forth from you your best. And most of us are not at our best when we're in transition. So we are operating at a depleted level. And so because of it, oftentimes people get sick, or oftentimes they say, I can't do it. Right? They quit, or they have to back off to some extent. Now, some people have the luxury of not jumping into something too soon, but most lay people I know, don't have that luxury. So some of the things that will be important, whether you know what you're doing next or not, is to take small steps. Perhaps you want to consider doing something on a part-time basis if you can afford to. Or perhaps you want an in-between job. I always think, my job is pretty intense. I listen to people's struggles all the time, and I think I would rather go up to the YMCA of the Rockies in Essex Park and go clean toilets for a while because it'd be less stressful, and I could just do something and feel good about it and get a paycheck. Is there an in-between thing you could do? A lot of people feel bad if the only job they can get is at Starbucks or a waitressing job. Those are great in-between jobs. And oftentimes graduate school is too. It's jumping from one intense thing to the next that can be a problem. So there are actually some helpful things, there's some positives about transition. So the positives has to do with you're not locked into anything. Once you move out of this part of your life, you're going into a place where you're not locked into any patterns, and you're free to maybe do something different. Maybe try something you've never done before. It's a time of being open to the creativity of the time. William Bridges, who writes a lot about transition, talks about being open to any ideas that come your way and jotting them down because they may lead you to where you're meant to be. Now, I think most of us who are people of faith would call that the Holy Spirit at work. But so it can be an exciting time and an open time and a time of freedom if you will, if you can buy into that side of it. Most people get dragged down by the other, but it can be a great time, an exciting time. One of the things that's really helpful in a time of transition, again, I said that it's that loss of identity, and sometimes people feel not at their best selves, especially when you don't have, and everyone's asking you every day, what are you doing? What are you going to do now? And you don't have an answer. Sometimes it can really, you can get into a real rut. So one of the important things that is suggested during this time is to stay connected to something that is meaningful, to help you feel a sense of purpose. So again, it's important not to do too much too soon because of your depleted energy, but to find something that makes you feel good about who you are and what you're connected to. So that has to match your gas gauge. So that could be as simple as, dedicating your prayer life to maybe something that is related to the ministry you're in right now. It could be, I'm just going to be aware of immigration issues in the news and maybe write some letters. It could be, there's this old lady down the street that doesn't seem to have anybody. Maybe I'll go visit her one day. Or maybe you want to start doing some volunteer work to help you keep your Spanish language skills developing. And then there's the people who find a ministry that kind of takes care of all this. But it's important to be connected to some kind of meaningful action or awareness during a time of transition. So that kind of summarizes the key points that I wanted to share with you about transition, to keep those things in mind. My spirit has not caught up with me yet. The next of the areas that I wanted to focus on of our 4 areas is a sense of direction and preparing for the future. For those of you, for the people that had the hardest time in the transition time, they weren't prepared for it. They had never thought about it. They assumed it was going to be easy, or they were overwhelmed by it. So some of these things I'm going to mention, mostly these are reflection questions of things that might help give you a sense of direction. So the first thing is try not to have unrealistic expectations. I say try. I meet people who say, oh, I had no expectations. I don't know that it's possible to really have no expectations. And we usually don't find out that we had expectations until they're not met. So one of the things is you're going to have expectations, and then the people in your life are going to have expectations about you. What are you going to be like now, or how fast are you going to get started again in your next career or whatever? You might have expectations of how they're going to treat you or support you. So one of the things I highly recommend, if you can do this at all, you can do this for yourself, is to take some time to really try to be honest with yourself about what your expectations are. And then if you have the kind of friends and family that you could do this, I would talk to them about it as well and ask them what their expectations are of you, and then to discuss those. Many of the people who come to me, they come to me 3 or 6 months after they completed their service. And this is huge. You know, everybody thought people were going to be interested in their experience, and no one seems to be interested. Or people's friends and family say things like, oh, I'm glad that's over now. Why is it taking you so long to get started again? It would be really good if you have the openness with people in your life to talk to them about expectations. Now, there's another thing about expectations that's about you that I would like to mention. One is to not set yourself up for failure. I think this is, again, it's expectations. It's the expectations we have of ourselves. Now, it's fine to know what you want to do with your life, but it's important to remember we don't just get there in one giant leap. We normally get there, you know, in tinier steps. So don't expect that the next thing you're going to do is going to be the thing you've always dreamed of or the thing you're hoping for. There are a percentage of people who fall right into the next great thing. But most people don't get there right away. They take steps. They have to take another job before getting to the job they really want, things like that. So don't set yourself up for disappointment that you're not going to walk right into the best thing that, you know, the thing you really want. Another thing is to try not to compare yourself with others, or to buy into where others think you should be at this point. So some of the expectations, some of the comparisons that people make, you might, if you're in a community, you might be comparing yourself to the others in the community, and some get the job they want, and some got scholarships, but I didn't, you know. So part of it might be that. But one of the big ones, especially for those of you who have graduated from college in the last few years, how many people compare themselves to their peers who from college who did not do service? Because they then will be 1, 2, 3 years further down the road in their careers, possibly. And so a lot of people feel like, you know, and sometimes they're even told, well, you just wasted that time. You know, you should be at this point. You know, that's rubbish. What you've just done is so valuable, and hopefully you will, you know, that will come to life as you go on. But initially, a lot of people compare themselves to others, and that really can set you up for real disappointment. And then the last comparison is try not to compare what you do next with what you've just done. What's next may or may not be as meaningful or challenging. That's okay. You can always find things that will bring more meaning into your life. But a lot of people feel like, oh, I have to build on this, and the next thing has to be more exciting or more challenging. It's okay to just stay put for a while and get to know people again and to take it easy. The challenges of the world aren't going away. They'll be waiting for you. So that's the first one, is about expectations. The next one has to do with our support system. none of us would be anywhere without our support system. And during this transition, you're going to need all kinds of people. The people who offer you emotional support, financial support possibly. You're going to need people who really understand you and what you're going through and what you're part of right now. Other people might just be real practical people. So it's helpful to consider some questions before you, as you're going through this time. So one is, who would you consider your support system? You know, I like to call it your strength team. Who are those people you really need right now? So one is to identify them. And then the next thing I would do is to say, what do I need from them right now? And then lastly is to say, is to look at how might you communicate your needs to these people. This kind of goes back to the expectations, but oftentimes people felt like they didn't get the help or the support they needed from people and were really disappointed and sometimes even really hurt. But they'd never talked to them about that they needed them or what they needed from them. You'll get a lot of people that will say, oh, if you need anything, let me know, versus really saying what that means. So look at your support system and look at what you need from people and then find a way to let them know what it is that you need from them. Another thing is to look at what you have in your life that is not ending that will help to sustain you. So who or what will sustain you or bring you stability during this time of change? Sometimes when we're in transition, it feels like everything has changed. Everything, I have to start over in every way. But that's not true. We have ourselves. We have, our practices if we choose to keep them, like what do you do about prayer or exercise, things like that. Who are the people that have been with you all along and will continue to be your supporters during this? So to realize that you have a lot going for you. So one of the things I would do is take the time to say, what is not changing in this transition that can help to support me or sustain me during this challenging time? So the next area I'd like to look at with you is direction. So how do we, finding our next steps. I would like a show of hands. Do you have that little doodad where you can raise your hand? Raise your hand if you already know what you'll be doing next.
Looks like there's just a couple hands going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're in on this. So some of you might know, and many of you probably don't have a clue yet. It's so hard when you're in the middle of what you're doing to take the time. I really feel for you having to apply for things, and I think that's really tough. So when starting over, it's hard to know where to begin. There's so many questions, before you to look at. And so I'm not going to give you answers, but I'm going to give you some more questions that might actually help you find some direction. So the first one has to do with what are your hopes, concerns, or fears? If you take time, I do this all the time with people in my workshop, to sit down and write these things out. And then ultimately, what might happen is it might surface what direction you might need to focus on. So for example, one of the hopes people often say is, I would like to find a community similar to the experience they've had, in their volunteer experience. Well, if that's one of your hopes and it really means something to you, then maybe it needs some attention. Maybe that's one of the things you're going to spend some time on right away because that was that valuable to you. So you could take any one of these and, by asking yourself the question, oftentimes when I ask the questions, people say, I'm surprised that this is what came up. I didn't, I didn't anticipate that these were the things that were going to surface right away. Some of them, yes, some of them, no. And so out of that, it might help point you in a direction to say, this is important to me, I want to spend more time with it. The next one, is asking you. So when you think about your concerns for the future, is there one of these from A to F that really speaks to you more? So finding a job, your living situation, relationships, that could be the relationships with that you have now or previous relationships you've had, dealing with your debt, especially if you have school loans, or your hope to continue to make a difference, or is it just all of the above? So if you pick one of those, what are you most concerned about?
All right, Julie, it looks like there's answers all over the board again.
Okay.
There's E, F, C, A, and D, A, just about all of them.
Okay. I kind of thought there'd be all F's, to tell you the truth, but that's good. So again, these concerns might give you some direction. Look at them saying, I need to pay attention to this. One of the other areas has to do with what are your needs. So take some time to write down, what do I need? And what are the things I can do to address my needs? And then maybe I need some help in addressing these needs. And then to say, who is it that I could turn to for this help? So as practical as you can be in writing these things out, it's going to point you in the right direction. Another way of doing the same thing would be to do your worst case scenario. What could be the worst case scenario in this transition, or what's next? And then to say, what would I do if that in fact did happen? Hopefully it's not wrestle an alligator, but again, that might give you some direction and point out some things to give you some steps. And the reason I mentioned the thing about what are your needs, and this one about worst case scenario, and having some ideas, is hopefully it will give you confidence that you have something going for you. You've thought this stuff through, and I have some ideas to act on. The other is our support system is usually nervous and want us to know that we've been thinking about it. And not that we're not just saying, I don't know, but you're going to have some answers. That gives them confidence as well. The next one has to do with, that might point you in the right direction, is to take time to really reflect on, what is my purpose now? What is my mission? That's much more than just your job. As this says, it's combining what you're good at with what you care about. That's a place that, in this image here, if you have skills or talents that don't match what's available for your passion, maybe that you need more training, and vice versa. And so to say, this is what my life is about at this point, or where God is calling me to be about in my life, not just my ministry or my job, that might give you some direction as well as you begin to make choices. Our next section has to do with leaving well. As I listen to the stories of people who have moved forward, they've been able to say, this experience as it was is over, they give thanks for it, and they look for meaningful ways to stay connected to it. How you end will influence how you begin. And so the first part of that is dealing with the painful parts, dealing with the hurts. Everybody has, all kinds of ups and downs and, issues. I don't know anybody who doesn't. They didn't have to be huge. But for some people, some of the things that happened really left some deep scars. And so some of the things I hear from people range from anywhere from violence and trauma, things that happened to themselves, or things they witnessed or heard from the people they ministered to, conflict situations, especially in community, hard feelings towards the program or the ministry site, feeling like a failure or a disappointment that they weren't able to do more, feelings of guilt, whether it be in this leaving that you're going to do, or dealing with the whole concept of privilege that becomes so obvious to you. The goal is to leave your experience with as little baggage or leftover issues as possible. You'll have plenty to deal with. You don't need to bring the old ones with you. And they don't go away just because this is over. Many people think that's it. Oh, I don't have to see them again. I'm not going to be in that situation. But you still have to deal with the feelings and the scars that you still carry. It's the only way it will change is by dealing with it. The most common hurt is in relationships, especially in community life. And there is some freedom that you won't be with those people anymore. But it will do you a great service to somehow make peace or to find a way of resolving something so that you can move forward. But at this point, you don't need to find out who was right or wrong or bring up all the details or rehash it all. It's not about the details. It's about moving forward. And how can I move forward in a way that this isn't going to continue to impact me? So it's time to decide, what do I let go of? Is there something that I don't need to carry anymore? You can do this directly. You can do it through prayer. You can do it through journaling. You can do it through healthy rituals, this letting go or this making peace. But ultimately, you may decide, you may realize, I still have some issues that I really still need to look at and need some attention. And after this is over, you might need to seek out some professional help. The next one I don't think I need to mention too much. I think it's obvious. You need to give thanks to people who were important to you during this experience. The problem is things are going to get really hectic leading up to your end, and so you might need to really plan how and when you're going to express your gratitude to people. I think it's also important to remember that to allow people to thank you. Sometimes that's really hard for us, but that's their need to do that, and we need to graciously receive. And I tell you, many workshops of mine, the story that has the most passion attached to it is when people tell their goodbye story or the parties or the blessings they received. It's that important. It's something you will always remember. The next is to say goodbye. I'm always laugh when people say, oh, I hate saying goodbye. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know anybody who likes it. You'll find everyone's goodbye style when you're doing that. Most people, even those people who want to avoid it, that's their style. But goodbyes serve a purpose. It's a time to give thanks and to let people know how much they meant to you and that you will carry them in your heart. Goodbyes, when done well, allow us to move forward with peace in our hearts. Some of you may be staying in the same area, decide to stay in the same area, and you think, oh, I don't need to say goodbye. I'm still going to see those people. Unless you're still going to be doing the exact same thing, I would recommend that you still do some kind of ending, party, ritual, thanks, whatever, because things will be different once you're not in that same situation. So you need, before you leave, to think about what do you need to do before you go. Do you have any unfinished business that needs to be taken care of so you can move forward? What do you need to let go of? What do you want to hold on to? And who are the people that mean the most to you that you want to say goodbye to? And then lastly, this is something that I help people do, is to honor their experience when it's over. You might be reviewing now, in these last weeks, what it was like during your experience and remember all that. Go back and remember it. Reread what you wrote. Reviewing is the the starting point for integration. It helps you to identify what you learned, who and what meant the most to you, and how you want to live in the future. A couple ways to honor your experiences. One is through your story. If you have not already been warned, you will be asked by many people, how was it? And you will quickly find that some are interested and some are not. There are two versions of the story you tell for your listener and the one you do for yourself. So I think it's important when you're talking to others about your experience that you decide what you want them to know about your experience and what image of the people and the place do you want to portray. So it's important not to tell everything then maybe. Most people don't want to hear much, to tell you the truth, and so it's important to find maybe a simple way to answer, how was it? Some people struggle with people putting them on a pedestal because they've done something like this, and so rather than talking about what you did, you might want to share what I saw and what I experienced. And I mentioned then there's a story for yourself. That's the story where you really tell what happened and you tell everything. And most of those those stories are shared for the people who mean the most to you, people you can trust, or people who can relate to you. That's usually other volunteers or missioners. But integration doesn't just happen. Many people at my workshops say, I feel like my experience is in a box up on the shelf in the closet. The most important way to honor your experience is by remaining faithful to what it taught you and who you've become. I encourage people to hold their experience in open hands. That way you can continue to look at it and it can continue to speak to you as you move on. Integration for me includes reflection on the experience. Here's my favorite quote about reflection. Experience is not the best teacher. We learn nothing from experience. We only learn from reflection on our experience. Through that reflection, we will remember who were the key people, the key learnings, the key values, the things that I always want to remember and I want to incorporate into my life now. And then ultimately, it's about making choices to integrate it, finding ways to live those things in your life, no matter where you are, no matter where you go. Integration, and the goal is to remain faithful to who you have become. I will stop here, and if there's any questions that you have, we don't have a lot of time, but maybe there's one or two questions, and then I will share some final information with you. So does anybody have anything they want to ask right now?
Thanks, Julie. That was so rich and thought-provoking. I did have a question while I'm sure others are typing theirs in now. Do you have any books that you recommend that are especially helpful in the transition?
Yeah. First of all, from Mission to Mission, the organization I work for, we sell some booklets that have to do with volunteer life. We have something that is very much like what we've just shared, How to End. It's called Returning Home. We have another one called Welcome Home After You Return. We have a resource called How Do We Welcome Them Home for your family and friends. There's another book that we sell on behalf of one of our participants called At Home in the Journey. It has to do with missioners in transition. And then lastly, just about transition stuff, William Bridges has written a lot on transition, and his stuff is really good and really solid.
Great. At least one person commented that the books you've mentioned are great, so there's a little endorsement from a participant there. Well, I don't see any more questions. Okay. I'm sure you've given everyone a lot to think about, though.
Yeah. I do want to mention a couple other things in our time here. Next is about the work that I do. I do these workshops for people to come, and we do the things we just talked about. We talk about all those things, but in a room full of people who've had a similar experience. So we give people the chance to talk at length about their experience. We look at the hard stuff, the painful things that were part of the experience, and we take some time to look at how to heal from that and pray about that. We look at the good things. What are the things you always want to remember from your experience, and then we talk about integration. So we have these 3 or 4 times every year, usually in the Midwest and on the East Coast, and I would encourage you to consider coming. Many of your programs have final retreats, and those are while you're still in the experience. And what happens at that retreat versus what would happen at mine, they're 2 different things. Usually people come to me when they're in that icky time of transition, or they're really struggling, or they're just missing their experience. So when you're not in it, it looks different than when you're still in it. So and I've never met anyone who was sorry they ever came. Most people are just can't believe there's not more people who attend. Most people say at the end, I had no idea how much I needed this. And so please consider coming. I do this every year. It doesn't have to just be this year if you're busy, if you find a job or whatever. In the next year or so, you would still get a lot out of it if you are interested in coming. And I'm happy to work with you to make it possible financially. We never turn anyone away. So it would be great. And there's nothing like being in a group of people with similar experience to reflect on this experience with. And the other thing is I was contacted by the folks at Notre Dame who had the Volunteers in Transition Certificate Program that takes place July 27th to August 1st. And they wanted to make sure that you were aware of it. The contact information is there at the bottom. And then the last thing I would like to share is just a final kind of, I guess, in a way, it's a really important reminder. Many people feel called to these experiences. Some, may not use that language. But, the God who calls us to the experience is still with us and will be through our transitions and beyond. And so I would like to finish with this. Look back and thank God. Look within and find God. Look around and see God. Look forward and trust God. If anybody needs anything from me, would like to talk about any of this more at length, would like some resources, feel free to contact me. I wish you the best in ending your time, and I look forward to knowing that you're going to continue to live and serve our world in new and exciting ways that will be different because of the experience you've just had. So thank you for doing that.
And I know I speak on behalf of everyone, Julie, when I say thank you for being with us and sharing your insight and wisdom on this important topic. It's been such a wonderful experience, even personally. Having been back now for about 8 years from my own service experience, I'm still processing it and really enjoyed listening to what you had to say. So thank you, Julie. And thanks to all of you who attended. We're so grateful, and we hope that you will come back to us. Catholic Volunteer Network also offers a number of resources for volunteers in transition, and I will actually send you a follow-up email with that information and links to our website on that. So we won't keep you too much longer, but thanks for your attention and your participation in today's session. And we look forward to your feedback in our evaluation survey. Thanks so much, and we hope that you all have a great day. Goodbye, everyone.